Game Lunch Hour. Today we're talking with Susan O'Connor. We're not recording yet, just explaining how the episode actually works. This is going to be about a 40 to 45-minute episode as per usual. We're going to start by talking with Susan one-on-one, and then we will get into community questions. So audience, if you have questions for Susan, you may get the chance to ask them directly. If you have a question, ask it in the chat like this. And then do me a favor and mark it for me with a Q emoji. That way I know that it is a question. And if you like somebody's question, hit that Q emoji again so that I can see that multiple people want it asked. For the most part, I will move through questions chronologically. So the earlier you ask the question, the more likely you are to be able to chat with Susan for a second. And then in the question as well, let me know if you would like to actually get on stage or if you would like me to ask the question for you. If you have a mic, you're more than welcome. We're actually going to pull you up and you can ask the question yourself. All right.
Awesome. I love that.
Yes. I'm going to get the Discord bot recording for us. I still don't actually know if Craig has to be on stage, but we give Craig a place of honor.
Lucky Craig. Hi, Craig.
All right. And let me get the soundboard ready to start. And Susan, I'm going to do the intro here. Oh, wow. I'm going to do the intro here and we'll actually formally start. The way that you know I have finished the intro is when I ask you what you're having for lunch. Sound good?
Okay.
All right. And don't worry, nobody is ever actually eating.
I wish I was eating.
Me too. All right. Ready to begin? Here we go. Welcome, game dev adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour, the best dang game dev podcast on the planet. Today, we're talking with Susan O'Connor about how to bring a square peg story into a round hole games.
Yes.
Oh no. Wait. We're going to start one more time.
No worries. I see it. Oh my God, William, I so get this. This is my life.
The soundboard failed. This is everybody who's watching it live gets to see the behind the scenes here. One more time through. It's okay. I kind of messed up the title anyway. Here we go. Welcome, game dev adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour, the best dang game dev podcast on the planet. Today, we're talking with Susan O'Connor about how to fit a square peg story into a round hole games.
Yes. Oh, no. Again?
Third time's the charm.
The Indie Game Lunch
One
Hour.
more time. It doesn't usually take 3
I heard
tries.
something awesome. That was amazing. Was I the only one that heard that? A big whole kaboom.
Yeah, well, that was the whole idea. All right, one last time, I promise.
Third time is always the charm.
Third time's the charm. Welcome, game dev adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today, we're talking with Susan O'Connor about how to fit a square peg story into a round hole games.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
In our live magical podcast, the best dang game dev podcast on the planet, we give stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as the chance to actually ask questions of industry experts in the second half of each episode. As always, I'm the host of the podcast and the founder here at the Indie Game Academy, Willem Delventhal, and joining me today is Susan O'Connor. Susan is a longtime writer in the game industry and is now the founder and CEO of the Narrative Department, which is one of the foremost places to go and learn about writing and narrative design. We love sending people there ourselves. Welcome to the show, Susan. What are you having for lunch today?
Oh my God. Great question, because I have been so busy this week that I haven't gotten to the grocery store yet. So honestly, it's going to be something I probably order off my phone, or it's going to be peanut butter on a spoon.
Peanut butter on a spoon. Is that the trick? That's what writers really need.
That is the desperation play. You know what I mean? It's like one step above eating potato chips for lunch.
I am freshly moved into a new place, which has been lovely. I've been
Congrats.
Thank you. Yes, I've been on the wind for a couple of months. But it means that I too have no groceries, and I've been spending so much money on takeout. My God.
Oh my God. I know. I literally have got to go to the grocery store. Either that or I'm going to go broke this month. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I swear takeout prices have dramatically increased too. Like, since when is ordering a pizza and a soda like $50?
I know, dude. I feel you. As someone who got a pizza 2 days ago, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I got a pizza last night. All right. Well, welcome to the
Pizza for
show.
everybody.
Every day. That's the hot tip of the day. That is the main takeaway. All right. Well, welcome to the show. Susan, it's great to chat with you. We've touched base a
Yeah.
couple of times in the past, but we haven't yet had you on the show. You are indeed one of the people we hear about the most often when talking about learning, writing, and narrative design, which is a huge
Aw.
chunk of our community. People just want to tell awesome stories. I would love, as always, to begin with the most important question of this podcast, which is for your origin story. So, Susan, where are
Oh.
you today in the game industry, and how did you get there?
Okay, I will keep this short because I am old. I could make this long.
You are
but we're not
old.
going to. I am an old. There's just no denying it. So yeah, I started as a game writer back in the day when dinosaurs walked the earth. I mean, as I've talked about, my first job writing for games was a slumber party game for girls, which totally honestly, I'm still proud of to this day. It was called Girl Talk, and it was very silly. And basically, it was a game that was based on a board game, and the UI was a cartoon version of a girl's bedroom, and there were 4 little girl avatars. My fingers are the avatars, and they were in the corner just kind of yapping like little girls do at a slumber party. You know, oh my God, Johnny's so cute. You know, can I braid your hair? That kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And of all the people that applied for this job, I was the only one who had ever actually been to a slumber party. In other words, I was the only woman. But as a woman, I used to be a girl, and I did go to slumber parties. So I was what we call Petunio found a picture of it. Oh my God, that is Girl Talk. Cry. Amazing. So anyway, my gender was a bonus. Yay. And that's how I got started way back in the day. Okay, now we're going to speed up. I worked there for a few years. None of us knew what we were doing. It was truly indie game studio vibes. Just like, I guess we'll figure this out today. I don't know. And then we were purchased. And then a few months later, we were all laid off. And I got the severance package of $30,000. And I literally thought, I'm rich.
Wow. That's a
I'll
pretty
never
generous.
have to work again.
That's a pretty generous severance package. Yeah.
It was, but that money is that's not what rich is.
Mm-hmm.
That buys you a little bit of time.
Yeah.
But while I was basically blowing through my severance package like an idiot, my smarter colleagues went on to get jobs at studios, other game studios. So suddenly I had these connections at other game studios. So when they needed a writer, they're like, yeah, we do know a writer. So you can draw a straight line from Girl Talk to Gears of War, actually, if you want to just have a good laugh about it. But
Gears of War just is a slumber party, little known fact.
Well, it kind of is. Real talk. That's how I thought about it. So anyway, so I started working on projects, and slowly but surely, I got a job like in a real-time strategy game, and then Gears of War was a big opportunity for me. And then right after that came BioShock, which was great because Gears of War was really a challenge narratively, but BioShock was a dream narratively. And then I went on to work on a bunch of other games. I think I've worked on 25 titles, and, really proud of like best-selling, award-winning. And, as with all games, it was a team effort. So I'm proud of my contribution and grateful to have been a part of these projects and learned so much from them. Worked on Tomb Raider, worked on some Star Wars titles. Anyway, long story short, in 2019, I had a huge accident. I crashed. I used to have a Vespa, and I crashed it. And everything I landed on broke. Ooh. And that put me out of commission. So I spent so I was like 2 weeks in the hospital, multiple surgeries, the summer in bed. Then I graduated to a wheelchair. Speaking of feeling like an old, then I got into a walker. Like I literally had to learn how to walk again.
Wow.
So very dramatic. All of it was fine. I'm totally okay. But what it meant for a freelance game writer is that I was totally broke. I was out of work. And of course, I didn't have the kind of savings you're supposed to have when you're a freelancer. So anyway, I was like, whoa, what am I going to do? And I started exploring the idea of doing some teaching. And I was teaching at University of Texas for a while, and it was great. But then I was like, I want to work not with students, college students, but I want to work with working game devs. How could I do that? And that's how the narrative department came to be. And so since 2020 or 2019, I have been running courses at the narrative department. And it has been honestly the thing I am most proud of in my whole career.
Amazing.
So that's my story.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What a good story. I didn't actually know about the crash. And yes, well done. You got through it. Well done.
Without anyone falling asleep.
Without anyone falling asleep. I don't know. Can we check the audience? Can we poll if anyone is asleep right now? I absolutely agree with that last point in particular, the concept of teaching and how absolutely rewarding it is. I was teaching for an organization called Playcrafting during one of my first industry jobs, actually. And there was a moment where, a moment that happened many times, but one in particular that stuck in memory. We had a curriculum where students would build a guided game, exactly one thing, with an exact curriculum, exact script for 6 weeks. They do 3 different 2-week games. And then during the last 2 weeks, they'd build whatever they want. And during that last 2-week period, every cohort was the best thing on the planet. And there was this one student in particular who was just like hungry. He'd come in every day. He was so pumped to learn. And then he made an ASCII art 3D RPG. So imagine a 3-dimensional like @ symbol, like we're saying like @gmail.com, holding a sword and a shield and having a little fluttering cape that he made with shaders, like wandering around. It was brilliant. And that moment, I was completely sold. I think there's a concept that teaching is one of the best ways to learn, and I've always found that to be true.
Yes.
And then in addition, 100%. And then in addition, that moment where the light comes on and everything clicks, and suddenly somebody becomes a game developer and can make all of their dreams come true is absolutely addictive. So I completely understand. Completely understand.
Yes. Yeah, teaching is really magic. And honestly, and maybe you've had this experience too, but I find that teaching and game writing have so much in common. Because in a lot of ways, the game writer, of course, the whole story, but you have to really kind of lead the players and let them discover it for themselves. And that's good teaching too. As a teacher, you can't tell them everything you want to share in the first meeting and then be like, okay, we're done, and it's got to be something that they discover, not you force on them, if that makes sense. You can't lecture them. You learn by doing.
I love that. Yeah. Amazing. Well, let's get into the topic of the day. So we mentioned it way at the beginning of the episode, but our topic today is how to fit a square peg, aka story, into a round hole, aka games. So I'm assuming that we went with this topic because sometimes people don't like stories in games, and other times it's just hard to find the right place for story to fit. So why don't we get like your 101, your intro? How do we fit the round peg into the square hole?
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to do the thing teachers shouldn't do, which I'm just going to give it to you, and then we'll talk about it and unpack it. So the reason I talk about this, I gave a talk on this literally 15 years ago with the same title. So it's an ongoing chronic problem, although it is getting better. The problem is that story and games are just such different creatures, and to bring them together requires some give and take on both sides, which doesn't always happen. So the TLDR in terms of how to bring these things together is to be thinking about story as a system, not a deliverable. So I think a lot of times when games studios run into trouble and teams run into trouble, it's when they're like, okay, well, let's hire a writer when we need the dialogue. Like need a script. We need I used to feel like sometimes studios wanted me to be an ATM. Like they wanted to hit the button on my tummy and have the paper spit out. Like here's the script. But, and as I'm preaching to the choir here, I know you guys all here totally get it, but other devs don't, which is like, it is a system. It needs to be integrated with everything else, and all the different systems, the narrative systems, the design systems, the programming, all audio, everything. It all needs to be integrated, and it can't happen unless everyone's kind of in there together. So that's the short version of why there's just a disconnect, and there's a disconnect on all sides. I think sometimes working writers don't really, especially from other industries, don't quite understand what it means to write for games. And I think, to be completely honest, I think as working game writers over the years, we've had to kind of figure out like what it is that I do. Like to your point about teaching is a great way to learn. Like I feel like I can explain so much better what it is I did now than I could when I was doing it. And that really got in the way because I couldn't explain to my coworkers and my teammates what the hell it is I did and how I contributed. So they were confused. I was confused. Like, it was just kind of a hot mess, but it is knowable. And it's just about understanding that it's really a system and it has to be part of it from the jump. So.
A small aside before anything else, that phenomenon of like, I wasn't really able to explain what was happening in the moment. And then looking back, I get it. That's very normal. Yep. And I encourage everyone to continue trudging ahead as you learn. And eventually it'll make sense.
Right. Totally.
Eventually you'll start at school. All right.
Why not?
Why not? So I think it's definitely really interesting. I 100% agree. Writers and narrative people. And then I think there's a couple of other categories that this happens for, like audio is another one this happens for all the time, where we go and we find you and we go, hey, we already built 80% of this game. Can you like plug in your magic now? Would that be cool? And it's not necessarily the right way to approach it. So how should we approach it? This is an indie game academy. We're all here because we dream of launching studios, or we're doing it right this second. How should we do it? How we fix this?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So that's such a great question. So I think that again, I think it's about, first of all, setting your goals. Like, is the narrative experience going to be a really important part of what we do? Like, it doesn't have to be. Like, games don't need stories the same way film or television does. And so I think that is just like an initial, like, let's get clear on that kind of thing. Like, it's very tempting to fantasize about, we're going to ship a game and it's going to be all things to all people, right? But the reality is, I mean, I learned this honestly in Gears of War. Like, Gears of War, the first Gears of War was a tech demo. That's how they described it internally. Like, we're not going to ship this until it looks incredible because it's a tech demo for our engine. And so story wasn't that important, right? And so when push came to shove, story got shoved, and frankly, as it should have been in retrospect. At the time, I was frustrated, but in looking back, I'm like, good on you, versus something like BioShock, where it's like story is everything. And so, first of all, just knowing how important it is, really. And of course, in early days, you can't be sure, but like, put a stake in the ground, I think is really useful. Okay, now if story is really important, then it's about bringing someone who knows something about writing for games into the mix, right? And we, as an industry, we've gotten so much smarter about it. So I know you can find people who are trained game writers, because I've trained a whole bunch of them, but they're not the only ones. Some of them are here on this call, which is makes me so happy. Hi, Cece. So working with someone who's again, it's not enough to be a good writer. I think really understanding what it means to write for games, because so much about writing for games, honestly, is counterintuitive. It's like you think, okay, here's how I think writing must work in a game. And then you really get into it and you're like, wait a minute, on some level, it looks like what we do in film or TV. It's like, our cutscene scripts look just like film scripts, and there's characters and there's dialogue, and it's like, okay, it's the same thing. But then in other ways, it's completely different, of course, around things like player agency. Who really tells a story? Is the player really the hero of the story? No, actually, probably not. He's the hero, or she's the hero of the gameplay. But, putting the pressure on the player to carry the story is really a setup for failure. And I have seen multi-million-dollar projects make this mistake, So it's little things like this that, like, bringing someone on who has kind of either had the training or they've shipped a game and they've sort of learned one way or the other, right? The hard way or the easy way. The hard way is shipping games, and which is what I did. And then the easy way is taking classes. And then getting them on board. And the key for me about making this work is focusing on what I think game writers really do is not put words on a page, but really be shepherds of the player's emotional journey through the game. And this is what designers do too, which is why we have to collaborate, right? But I think that writers can really work closely with the team and really understand, what are we doing for this player? Like, what are they going to feel when they play this game? Emotions are such a great meeting space for everyone on the team, because ultimately what we're trying to do is create something fun, and fun is a feeling. And every game delivers a different flavor of fun, right? So a horror game is fun for a horror fan, right? And then the writers can really, and narrative designers can think, okay, if this is sort of what the player's going to feel just with the gameplay, right? It's like the gameplay inspires feelings of of excitement and laughter because it's sort of silly and fun. Okay, how could characters or a world or whatever enhance that feeling? You know, make it bigger or deepen it or make it more complex. And rooting all of our work in that player's emotional journey is such a good way to keep everybody aligned, and also lets everyone kind of stay in their lane, right? So if we know that the goal is X kind of fun, the designers can contribute to building that fun with their tools, systems, mechanics, etc. And the writers and designers, narrative designers, can contribute with their tools, character, dialogue, world building, that kind of stuff.
Amazing. That's really interesting. As a designer myself, I fully agree in the power of emotional objectives. What is it that the player is trying? What is it that we're trying to give the player? What is the experience that we're trying to deliver to the player? And I personally love, as somebody who works a ton in the indie space, I personally love giving maximum autonomy to my team. So I love that as a tool, because I can say, even to like my engineer, well, we want the player to feel this way. Whatever you're doing, try to make them feel that way. Because it creates that cohesive direction. I had a moment when I was working at InView where an engineer made a completely random feature. It was a musical staircase. And all of my playtesters went up saying that it was their favorite thing. I hadn't designed that, hadn't asked for it. I just had given them a vague sense of direction on how the whole experience should go. And they wound up going, well, a musical staircase would be cool. And they had the extra hours. They didn't do it on their work time or anything. And they just kind of plugged it in, and it was awesome. So giving that high level, here's how it should feel, is extremely powerful in game development in general, and absolutely in game design and narrative. I have I have a pullout that I want to ask you more about. So earlier on, towards the beginning of your introduction, you talked about knowing how important the story is to this game. So can you tell me a little bit about working on a game where story is, and I'm doing air quotes for anyone who's listening to this episode later, where story is not important?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have to be careful, right? Because I don't want to throw anything under the bus. And I would just want to say that there's nothing wrong with story not being a priority. It's a legitimate creative choice, right? Because it is hard to bring story and game together, hence the square pegs round hole reference. So if the whole team, because everyone's got to be on board, not just, of course, the writer wants to make a great story in the game, but the programmers have to be on board, you know, the whatnot. So projects where, so I'm going to anonymize this, but everyone can guess which game I'm talking about. That's how I'm going to get around this. So let's say, hypothetically, I'm working on a game, and it's a big military shooter. So what it's like working on a game where story isn't important. First of all, they bring you on really late, right? So the game's been in production or whatever, it's been in development for 5 years. It's shipping in 6 months. Here you are on the first day, okay? And then no one talks to you. You get put into like a random office, and they're like, "Send us a script when it's done." And I'm like, "Okay." And then I, as an amateur, don't insist on playing the game, and I don't insist on attending playtests because I don't realize that's what I should be doing, because I'm a junior writer and I don't know what I'm doing. So I am flying blind and doing things like watching movies, war movies, to try to figure out what the story could be. There's some kind of story, and I'm supposed to work my magic and make it good. And I don't have the common sense to be like, well, that ship has sailed. Everything's done. I mean, I can't put lipstick on a pig. I mean, I can, but it's a pig with lipstick on it. And then I took cracks at writing some material and never got any feedback on anything. The first time I saw a lot of stuff was literally when I played the shipped version of the game. And that's when I found out how many bad assumptions I'd made and how many mistakes I made. And it was actually, I was like, okay, I guess I suck. I guess I'm going to quit. I almost quit the industry. And I was like, I guess I just suck at this and I'm just not cut out for it. But I just needed some guidance, and I needed to be better at knowing what my job really was. I'm actually going to, if it's okay, because this is so relevant, William. I just published this morning an article on myth busting, like what people think it means to write for games and what it really means. And the reason I want to share it is because I include a bunch of examples of games that are that put paid to some of these misconceptions about story in games. like these games are really doing it smartly, and here's what's smart about what they're doing. So is it okay if I just drop it in the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. Drop it in the chat. We will also, for anyone
Okay,
who's
great.
listening to this episode later, we'll put it in the description down below. Do you think that there actually are games where the story is not that important?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Tetris.
Sure. But even Tetris, is there narrative? Is it like would a narrative designer be on that team maybe? Let's say we're remaking Tetris today.
I think to me, Tetris is a really good example of, would a story make this better? It would make it different, but it's fine as it is, right? I mean, I think that, again, and there's so many different ways to define story. I mean, there's story, I talk about the idea of story flavor, you know, like you'll see this on like Counter-Strike or something, you know, it's like, look, some bad guys, hit it, you know, like what more do we really need? We're not here for a big, long backstory about these guys. I just want to, you know, shoot around with my friends. You know, so there's every game, players tell themselves stories no matter what they're playing. So it's about like, how much of it do you want to be crafted? How much of it do you want to be, you know, suggestions of a story and let the player imagine the rest of it? I mean, there's lots of different, I think that honestly in 5 or 10 years, we're going to have different words for what it means to have story in a game.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One of my more like fascinating conversations I've had in recent memory was with I think his name is Ty, the creator of RimWorld. And he talked about RimWorld is like just a really fascinating game in a lot of different ways, especially as a systems designer. And one of the things he talks about is he believes that his game, above all else, is an emergent storytelling engine. And he gave this example to me, which I thought was really beautiful, where he has where the little characters are little beans. They don't actually deliver any text to the screen. It doesn't say like, oh, Johnny's really like, Johnny decided to do X, Y, and Z. It just gives general emotion. So it'll say like, Johnny is mad. And then you'll see your little bean like walk away. And one of the things he says that he feels like he accidentally stumbled upon was what a powerful little storytelling machine that is. Because it doesn't really tell a story. It gives you almost parameters for you to fill out the story yourself. So it'll say like, Johnny is mad, and then you'll see him walking away from, let's say, the farm or something, and you'll be like, that other little bean, Trina, must have like messed up the crops and pissed Johnny off or something like that. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I love, sorry, go ahead.
All I was going to say is I just love I love the nuance of how one tells a story and how it does fit differently in different games. And I think it's really mature and it's something for junior narrative designers to take away, to say, yeah, my story doesn't belong in every game.
No, it doesn't. Exactly. And I just wanted to build on what you were saying, which is that, like, honestly, I think humans are storytelling machines. Like it's how we get through the world. I mean, as a species, it's how we have survived. You know, I mean, we've only had books and access to information outside of our heads only in the last few, not hundreds of years, but for most of the millions of years, everything we knew lived in our heads. And that's so to keep track of important stuff, like which mushrooms were dangerous and where the predators lived, you know, we would convey information to each other through story. Like we are storytelling machines, we're story making machines, and it's part of what we do. And that's part of the fun and challenge of writing for games, because no matter what you do, you are co-creating with the players. Yeah. You know, you're giving some story and they're giving some story, and that is always true. And we ignore that at our peril, right? The more we craft the story, the more we're making a film.
And the story we give doesn't always land either. It's not what the player actually interprets.
No, and what the player cares about, the player story is what's important, not the game story.
100%. I think if I'm hearing this right, oh wow.
Question of the day.
It's time for the question of the day, where we reiterate one of the most important things we learned and ask the audience for the answer. First person to get this answer correct gets a couple of bonus points for the House Cup. Here's my question. What does Susan O'Connor believe that we are primarily to our players as narrative designers? Oh, the heart trick worked. Hide. I don't think that's it. I'm also going to pull guides. Tell me a little bit more. She used a very specific term. We don't need to get there it is. Cheru nails it with shepherds of the emotional experience. I think that's a beautiful, simple takeaway from the episode. Absolutely. That's what we do really as game developers at large, but narrative designers, it's a huge part of what you own on a really powerful project. All right. I believe we have Mark on stage, which means it's time to get to community questions. Mark,
Ooh,
would you
fun.
like to ask the first question of the day?
Yeah, hi. Give me just
Hi.
a moment because I felt like I worded it well and then I lost my post.
Happens to the best of
Okay,
us.
so my question is, what is the best approach for game designers to work together with their narrative counterparts? So I work on mechanics design and systems design. My question basically revolves around what's the difference between a game designer that you would love to work with versus someone who's probably a little more challenging to work with.
Beautiful question.
Yes, my God, the crux of it all.
Hmm.
I mean, it's really funny because one of the advanced courses in the narrative department is game design for writers,
Hmm.
and it's taught by a game designer, Will Shen. And so I've been on a learning curve about this honestly myself. So I will tell you, the number one thing I would look for from a game designer is that they are a good communicator. Full stop. And the reason for that is I don't know what they do and they don't know what I do. So it's my job to communicate what I do clearly, and I need the designer to help me. So I'll give you an example. In Will's class, he says designers think fundamentally about how objects make people feel. And I was like, I have been doing this for a quarter of a century. No one has ever said that to me that way before. Where is my time machine? I want to go back and I want to redo every conversation I ever had with every designer because I would have asked better questions. I was thinking about people. Like stories are about people. Games are about objects. Like it is so easy for us to misunderstand each other, which is why I love talking about feelings, player feelings specifically, because objects and characters come together to create feelings in the audience, in the players. So that is the number one thing, is that a designer can find the time. And I know designers are thinking constantly. Designers' jobs are so hard, but being able to kind of hit pause on their thought process to take time to talk in terms that makes sure the writer understands what they're doing and why they're doing it. You know, what their work is like. And also like what their creative goals are, you know, and I think one of the best ways to start this conversation is to share what kind of games the designer loves to play, and so that the writer can better understand the type of designer that you are, because we've got to start finding some common ground to communicate creatively. And the writer's not going to start working in systems, and you're not going to start sweating out the details about dialogue, right? But somewhere you've got to find a place to meet. And so and to be fair, you know, most game devs are introverted and not necessarily the best communicators, you know.
I don't know.
I mean, I hate to say it, but yeah. So it's uncomfortable, right? And I teach my writers. I'm like, it's on you, you know, like make the first move, ask them to lunch, you know, like really make the effort to build some kind of a good working relationship. Don't let them just be the guy who sits over there, you know, because your work affects theirs and vice versa.
Did that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, thank you so much. Could you, as a favor to me, reiterate the point that you had about designers and objects real quick?
Sure.
Because I felt like that was beautifully said.
Oh, I know. That's exactly what I said when Will said it. I was like, oh. So basically, and again, I'm reiterating Will Shen. I take no credit for this, but he said designers, fundamentally, their job is to think about objects and how objects make the users feel. So I'll give you the example that Will did. He used an example of a fork. A fork gives us, this is the way he described it. I'd never heard this before because I never thought about a fork for more than 1 second. But he said a fork provides the user with a sense of security. The food is going to make it to your mouth and you're hungry. So that's good. Right? And so that's the point of a fork. Oh, okay. Makes total sense. And again, yeah, of course. No, there you go.
That's awesome. I love that. I also really love Will Shen. He's a really knowledgeable, smart guy. Y'all should reach out to him. All right. We've got our second question from Rick. Rick, would you like to come up on stage and ask a question?
Yeah. Hi there. All right. So my question is, But when you have a narrative person who is relatively new to writing for games, they may have experience writing novels and short stories, which is the medium of a novel or a book. What are
Mhm.
the biggest leaps in perspective that kind of traditional writer needs to adopt in order to be mentally ready to contribute to an interactive medium like games?
Ugh, such a good question. Okay, so here it is. The way I talk about this is, I mean, there's definitely a spectrum of storytelling, right? And I would say I'm drawing here on the screen. So for those who are listening, on one end, I would say is books, and then you move into kind of the film and TV arena, and then you move into game writing, and then actually marketing. So if I could draw this for you, it would make more sense. But I do think that people who work in mediums like books do have kind of the largest leap to make, and here's why. Books are great internal mediums, meaning books are a fantastic way to get inside of a character's head and live there for 20 pages or 5 chapters or whatnot. So it's an internal medium. Film is, just to sort of have some comparisons, film is a great visual medium. We can do so much storytelling through what we see, which is why we love good looking actors, right, on the screen, or we love things going kaboom because it looks amazing on a big screen. Games are, I don't know how else to put it. It's a goofy term, but it's a kinetic medium. The story is what the player does. It's all rooted in action and then how the world reacts to that action. Right? So story exists around the player who's doing things. And through doing things, they impact the world, and then the story happens in the world and with the NPCs. But it's just so different than books. I think a novelist or a short story writer would just lean towards really fleshing out that player character, that avatar, and giving them a backstory and a reason for living and all kinds of things. And that's beautiful work, but that can actually get in the way of the player's experience and the player's immersion. That's very confusing, right? And that just takes time to kind of unpack and get your head wrapped around. Like, well, if I'm letting go of the thing I do best, then what do I do here? And the answer is, when it comes to storytelling in games, it's not about breaking the rules, because like I said before, humans are storytelling machines. We are hardwired for stories. So no matter how the stories come to us, we translate it into narrative in our own heads. So it's not about breaking the rules, it's about bending the rules. So a novelist or a short story writer, in my opinion, is going to take all their talents and skills and tricks that they use in their medium, bring them over to games, but apply them to NPCs. Bring those characters to life. Make them rich and surprising and three-dimensional and amazing. And let the player character be something that the player can just inhabit and through their actions. Because players tend to define their characters through the actions they take.
The classic silent protagonist.
Right. But
Yeah.
even talking protagonists, the player and the avatar are just buddies. They're a little team moving through the game together.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because like when you have a story, like you can direct a very linear kind of experience, but like
Yep.
you have so many different mechanics and tools at your disposal, and the player may or may not encounter one thing or another. So how do you make sure they get it when they want to?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, thank
Love
you.
that. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
All right. I have a question from Humera. Humera asks, what common mistakes do beginner game writers make?
Ooh, amazing. I am literally writing an article on this right now. So let me see if I can just pull up what I was going to say. I mean, basically, I would say don't communicate, right? So that's one thing. They don't talk about their work because they're busy doing it. And they don't know, they feel like they don't know how to talk to other departments, so they don't. And the other thing, that the biggest mistake that they make is that they don't share their work early enough. That's the biggest mistake. And writers, I get it. You know, you're like, I don't want to have to show this work yet. It's not done yet, but nothing's done in games, right? And so, and because your work affects other people, you really do have to show people your stuff before it's finished. Because honestly, everyone else on the team has to show their work before it's finished too. My partner is a game designer, and I really saw this in action between us, because typically writers early in their career have been writing for a long time, but like in their journals secretly, not showing anybody. baby designers, right? Like early career designers have no choice. They have to show their designs early and often, and they therefore get used to it. It's hard at first, right? But like the more you do something, it's exposure therapy.
Mhm.
So they are comfortable showing janky, messed up, gray box, not fun yet stuff because they want that feedback. They want to know if this is directionally correct.
Mhm.
And as writers, we have to do that work as well, as unnatural as that feels. And so that means starting very high level, starting with pitches, starting with just, hey, I have some general vague ideas. Hey, I have some, what do you think of this character? That kind of stuff. And it's not about getting everybody's opinions on the quality of your work. It's about finding out how your work impacts their work and vice versa.
And socializing and getting ideas as well, though, is a valuable part of it. I think it's a huge part of what makes a huge part of what I love about game design. I'm getting horrific flashbacks to a job that will not be mentioned, where I was the only designer on mostly a tech team, on like a tech company team. And how frustrating it was to try to get early feedback and to have the response mostly be, well, this isn't designed yet. When, that's part of the design process. I want to say, by the way, earlier on, you mentioned how important communication is for designers. That's important for all departments, and so is showing your work early and often. It's a collaborative field, game development. Unless you are a solo developer, which very few of us are, you're going to be working with many different people, with many different opinions and many different disciplines, and that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. Exactly. You got to embrace it. 100%. Sometimes I say it's a team sport. Other times I say it's a contact sport. You are in there with them. And, it's hard at first, but then it becomes the best part of the job.
I really agree. Awesome. All right. We've got one last question, I think. Cece is on stage with the final question of the day.
Oh, sorry, I was muted for a bit.
Know you? Yes.
Hello. So I had a question for both of you. I'm curious to get both of your takes on this. So Susan, you brought up shipping games earlier, and I'm curious what in your minds counts as a shipped game. So if you submit something to a competition, whether it wins an award or not, does that count? If something releases on itch versus if it gets released on a paid storefront like Steam or Epic Games. So curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll give a short answer, which is if you put something you built in front of other people, it's shipped.
Yeah, I think I get this question and then iterations of this question a lot. Does this count? Does that count? I like to answer this as like, imagine a tier list. Like on the S class of the tier list is, of course, working on Call of Duty and Diablo 4. Like, yes, of course, that counts the most. But everything else counts too. A thing that you wrote in your journal counts. It's just pretty low on the tier list. Ultimately, when we say specifically a shipped title, I would count that as anything that is released and playable somewhere. So just itch totally counts as a released title, especially if you monetize it. But even if you don't, that's still a shipped title. Really what most people are looking for is that you've been through the whole production process. And so you actually know how to get from idea to fully released game.
100%. And I think that's something that game devs really value is people's willingness to put their stuff out there and be open to what players think. That's a very scary and yet essential Rubicon to cross or bridge to cross, It's hard, but it's what makes you feel like a pro.
Yeah. If you want a hard definition, make sure it's playable somewhere.
Yes. Findable and playable.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Awesome. Thank you both.
Thank you, Cece. All right. I think it's time for us to wrap up the episode. There's two things we like to do before we do so, Susan. The first one is we actually like to assign some homework here. So what is something that the audience can do in the next week that will take them about an hour that will help them practice some of what we talked about here today?
Ooh, okay. Well, I can't believe I can say this, but that article that I shared, which I'll share again at the bottom, it says, here's some things you can do. So I'm going to read it out loud because it's annoying, I know, for people who are just listening. So let me drop the chat in again. Play girl talk. I'd love you. Okay. So if you want to, I'm going to read them. Here we go. So this week, you could practice a world Bible. Like you could take a crack at writing a world Bible for a game. Don't look at their world Bible. Try to create it from your memory. Or you could play the games that I've linked here in this article and take a look at how they got story across, specifically the things I call out, right? Like take notes on what you're seeing. You don't have to play the whole game, right? Play the first 30 minutes of 2 games. Boom, there's your homework. What else? You could practice writing branching dialogue. There's a bunch of things, and some of these are taking longer than an hour, of course, but those are a couple things. When in doubt, oh my God, so many game writers and narrative designers have put their work out for you to learn from. So get after it.
I love that. Why don't we? I'm gonna make it a hard homework assignment because I like it when people interact with us a little bit. So here's the hard homework assignment. I think a World Bible is a perfect place to start. Look at an existing game, a game that already exists. Maybe play it a little bit, and then without looking at any of their documentation, write out at least one narrative document. World Bible is a great place to start. If you want to practice something else, I think that's okay. Once you've written it out, and you can Google what a Word Bible is if you're unfamiliar. Once you've written it out, it doesn't need to be fully fleshed out, just a little bit of it. Post it for us on LinkedIn. You can tag Susan O'Connor. You can tag myself, Willem Delventhal, and you can tag the Indie Game Academy. And we'll give you a little bit of feedback. We'll force you to get some practice in. All right.
Yes.
That's your homework assignment. All right. And now let's close down the episode. So, Susan, is there any last words of wisdom you'd like to impart or anything you'd like to plug here at the end of the episode?
Oh, yes. Well, I want to encourage everybody to keep going. That is literally all a creative career is.
Yep.
Ups, downs, does not matter. Just keep going. And that's it. Like, so that's the first thing I would say. And then I would just say, like, if you're interested in this stuff, like, feel free to join my list. I try to publish articles there to help with this stuff. And I would be remiss if I didn't share that registration for our masterclass opens up at the end of March.
Awesome.
And I love, William, your audience, and you guys are incredible. I see some of my grads here. So I love how we're sending people back and forth. I'm all for it. And I just think I'm so happy and grateful that so many people are excited about the potential of storytelling in games. And I can't wait to play your games.
100%. What a beautiful last sentiment. I think I love the concept of just keeping on. It's okay. The industry's a little rough, but we promise it will get better. Hopefully, probably. We'll see. One way or another, the only thing you can really do is keep on keeping on. And get a friendly pat on the back wherever you can. As always, this podcast happens every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Feel free to join us next time. Ask your own questions live. Anything that Susan mentioned will be linked down below in the description if you're listening after the fact. Susan, thank you so much for being here. This has been awesome.
Loved it so much. Love talking with you anytime, William.
Easy. All right. And to those who listened, thank you for listening. To those who asked questions, thank you for those as well. If you enjoyed, we ask that you send it along to just one other person who might enjoy it too. All right. I think that's it, everybody.
Please.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Oh,
thanks for coming. And goodbye to the live episode. Oh no.